What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing a surprisingly strong team in the Jungle Cup that helped me gain around 175 elo in just 4 sets, with Salazzle, Waterfall, Hisuian Samurott, and Shadow Greninja. Now earlier in the season when we had the Jungle Cup, I ran a similar double Dark Water backline, although a bit spicier that time around with Shadow Crawdon and Shadow Sharpedo, but it was clear that the typing plus access to buffed Waterfall was really strong in this meta, so I'm essentially running a 2.0 version of that same team, this time around with Hisuian Samurott as the Safe Swap, which has great coverage as a Safe Swap with both Sacred Sword and Icy Wind hitting a lot of the Jungle Cup meta for super effective damage, but also with Waterfall you can now also dominate in the matchups that a Water type should be winning, like up against Talonflame, Diggersby, Piloswine, etc. So yeah, this Pokemon is actually really strong. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get straight into the question of the day. What do you think is the best Waterfall user that typically doesn't actually run Waterfall? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle here, leading Salazzle into Altaria. So not the best matchup for me, but I do have access to both Dragon Pulse on Salazzle and also Icy Wind on my Samurott if I need it. However, at this point, I'm just going to look to overfarm here. I didn't throw straight away just in case the opponent did choose to throw straight away, as that would be on alignment. But either way, I'm now farming to 100 energy. Dragon Pulse gets the one shot. They're now going to come in with a Ferret, and I'm just going to blind throw a Poison Fang. I realize now I can actually swap out straight away into Greninja, and even if they're on Brick Break, I can still just barely outpace them to the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon not respected, it gets the one shot as the opponent maybe just forgot that I just debuffed them with a Poison Fang there, or maybe just not expecting that much damage. But either way, this game is going to be wrapped up. The opponent recognizing they can live one Night Slash, they have to no shield the first just in case I get a boost, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Incinerate gets the full farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So of course, just bigged up Samurott in the intro and didn't even need it for that first battle. But into the next battle, GG's to that trainer by the way, we're going to see a Piloswine in the lead. I'm now going to swap into my Samurott as a counter response to a Dunsparce Safe Swap. Now unfortunately, slightly behind on energy, this is going to be a not the best matchup here just because Sacred Sword barely won't quite be enough damage to KO. However, I can now just shield once, I can go for a full farm down, and of course they can't really come back in with the Piloswine, otherwise I'm going to be absolutely loaded on energy. The opponent is thinking about what to do, and they are actually going to come back in with the Piloswine, so never mind, I was wrong, I guess they can come back in, but either way, Sacred Sword going to be grabbing a shield there. They swap now into Corviknight, but I can now debuff their attack stat with an Icy Wind, and then I will be swapping into my Shadow Greninja. Now Greninja, of course, not a very bulky Pokemon at all, especially in its Shadow form, but they're debuffed. Air Cutter, not going to deal much damage. I'm now going to look to overfarm ever so slightly in this matchup, fire off the Hydro Cannon grabs the final shield, and that should have this game already wrapped up. The opponent going to go for another Air Cutter, that will not get the KO. They swap back into Piloswine, but it doesn't matter, we've already got the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon easily gets the one shot. We can come in with Salazzle, Incinerate, farm down the Corviknight, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's top there into next battle. I can see a Shadow Talonflame in the lead. So I've got 2 water types in the back. While Salazzle doesn't have an awful matchup here, we might as well safe swap into our Samurott, and the opponent's going to come in with an Umbreon. So this is going to be a really positive matchup for me. Of course, if they do have access to Last Resort, could be slightly dicey here, but you're going to see 2 Sacred Swords are very nearly enough damage to get the KO. So I'm going to no shield this. The opponent is going to go for a foul play there, which probably implies either they've got Double Dark or potentially even Psychic as the other option. The opponent is on Psychic. I don't know why they went for Psychic there. Either way, it doesn't really matter. They're now going to swap out into a Swampert, but this is still a fine matchup for me as I can go for an Icy Wind, debuff their attack stat, still reaching another Sacred Sword here. Sacred Sword is going to grab the first shot from the opponent, and the opponent still cannot commit to a full farm down. They are forced to throw some energy. At this point, they are very low on both the Swampert and the Umbreon, so I'm going to come in with the Shadow Greninja. I'm going to shield here, look to commit to a full farm down. The opponent realizing there's nothing they can do, and so they just concede the match. So, GG's top there into next battle. We're going to see a Togekiss in the lead. So this is going to be a fine matchup for me. The opponent is going to be safe swapping into Diggersby, and I'm going to respond with my Samurott. Now, I don't need to shield this, however, I might as well shield because now I can go for an Icy Wind. If they no shield this, I don't think they will reach another Scorching Sands. The opponent is going to no shield, and the opponent is going to get to a last second charge move, but I believe this should just be a Fire Punch. That's now debuffed and resisted and non-stat, doesn't do much damage whatsoever. They come back in with a Togekiss, and I'm going to fire fire off another Icy Wind. Icy Wind gonna be shielded by the opponent, and the opponent cannot commit to a farm down, but they do a perfect job of over-farming, throwing just before we reach the next Icy Wind. The opponent is now going to reveal their final Pokemon to be a Piloswine, but unfortunately Piloswine has nowhere to run up against this team. Dragon Pulse gets the one-shot. They come back in with a Togekiss, and this is game over. I'm going to shield here. The opponent will just barely reach another Charge Move before we can fully farm them down. So actually, I might as well go for a Poison Fang here. Poison Fang, gonna grab the final shield. I swap into Greninja, just force all of their energy, and the opponent, they can't really overfarm by much there. So that means Incinerate gets the full farm down up against the Togekiss, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I can see Shadow Fortress in the lead. A great lead matchup for me. The opponent is going to be swapping into their own Greninja. And this is a matchup where having Fury Cutter will, of course, be way better for us. Because, first of all, we're a lot faster to get to the charge moves. But also, Fury Cutters are going to hit for super effective damage. Whereas Waterfall, of course, is resisted. However, this is still a positive matchup for me. However, they might be able to win this in the 2-shield scenario. So here, I'm going to go for another Sacred Sword. If the opponent does end up shielding this, I don't think there's any point in me shielding my Samurott. As, of course, they will now outpace me to back-to-back Night Slashes. And I believe they will win CMP as well. So I'm just going to no-shield that. Night Slash gets the KO, but they don't get the boost, which is quite nice for me. I'm now going to come in with my own Greninja, and of course, I am going to no-shield this. This is still going to do quite a lot of damage here, and the opponent going to swap, try to snipe me with the Bug Bite damage. That did huge damage, and unfortunately, they can now reach a Sand Tomb. Sand Tomb, of course, double super effective. We have to shield there. I'm now going to wait to see what comes in. They come back in with Greninja, so of course, I'm going straight for Poison Fang. And their final Pokemon is their own Salazzle. You love to see it, but unfortunately behind on energy. Dragon Pulse gets the one-shot, and I'm able to take that game. So the opponent actually going for the exact same call there of that Salazzle and Greninja, just with a Fortress in the lead. Now into the next battle, unfortunately going to see a Water Gun Lantern, and Water Gun Lantern is probably the biggest problem for this team, as of course, it's going to very easily beat Salazzle, and then up on energy, both my Samurott and my Greninja are going to struggle against it. But here, we are going to grab a shield advantage. I did think about shielding here, and then going for maybe either another shield there, or just getting the KO up against the Crustal. However, I realized switch advantage doesn't really help me all that much up against a Lantern, whereas getting ahead on energy massively, we've got 80 energy already with Salazzle, that might be more beneficial, but unfortunately, we are just hard countered here in the back. Is the opponent going to have a second Fury Cutter user? This time around, it's going to be Galissapod, which is a lot worse for me because we're not even dealing super effective damage with the Water Shurikens or the Hydro Cannons. We have to go for Night Slashes. I can at least grab both shields. We can now go for Poison Fang. Poison Fang, of course, from this range, gets the KO, but unfortunately, it looks like they will just be able to fully Water Gun farm me down here. We can go for the first Poison Fang. I need to reach a Dragon Pulse. Second Poison Fang just isn't going to cut it, despite the fact that I have just debuffed their defense there. Poison Fang, number 2, doesn't KO. They can Water Gun farm me down, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's up on there. Into the next battle, I see a shiny Shadow Galarian Weezing in the lead. So really cool shiny here. We are going to no-shield the first move, as this will just be a Brutal Swing. I'm now going to look to overfarm, but the opponent's actually going to swap out and into a Mantine. I'm going to go for the Poison Fang here. Poison Fang, going to drop the defense. I'm now going to bank a second Poison Fang before swapping into my Shadow Greninja. Now, Greninja is very glassy, however, I can live on Aerial Ace, so I'm going to no-shield that, and then fire off the Night Slash. Night Slash coming through, barely doesn't quite get the KO, and we still don't quite Water Shuriken farm them down there, which of course is not ideal. But we do get the full farm down. We wait to see what comes in. We could have gone for one Water Shuriken first, but we go for Night Slash. Night Slash grabs the shield, and now I'm going to swap back into Salazzle and fire off the Poison Fang. Of course, this isn't going to do much damage. However, swapping out there will allow me to reach a Night Slash in the endgame scenario up against the Gorgeist there, which is which is exactly what I was going for. At this point, I'm just going to shield this. Probably going to be a Sludge. The opponent is going to go for the Sludge. I should be able to farm them down, but they do reach another charge move. The opponent just at the Brutal Swing this time around. We come out with an Icy Wind loaded, and this should be grabbing the final shield. Icy Wind does exactly that, but remember, because we threw one Water Shuriken before we swapped out, that means we're just one away. We can go for one more Water Shuriken, outpace to the Night Slash. Night Slash, super effective. It takes out the Gorgeist from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on their into next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Piloswine in the lead. So, one thing I will say is Piloswine in the lead, basically, it's just a guaranteed win for us, unless they have a really, really strong core breaker in the back. They're going to come in with Credilli, which I guess kind of is a bit of a core breaker. However, it's not going to be strong enough here, as we can shield the Rock Tomb. We can now just swap out of this matchup, and I can overfarm by a single Water Shuriken. I realize, of course, both my Pokemon are very strong into Piloswine. So here, if they do end up shielding, I really don't mind shielding back. The opponent is going to go for a Grass Knot there, so not even looking to debuff me. Here, I don't throw on the best timing, but it doesn't really matter too much as we go for the Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon is going to be shielded, and the opponent looking to throw on CMP, but they lose CMP. Night Slash gets the KO from that range. I'm now going to swap out into my Salazzle. We can go straight for Dragon Pulse here, and Dragon Pulse is easily going to be enough damage to get the KO there. We can just Incinerate, farm down Credilli, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on their into next battle. I can see Salazzle into a Shadow Mightyena. So, of course, I've got two Dark-type Pokemon in the back. I'm expecting Sucker Punch. Would be quite awkward if I swapped out there and they're actually on Thunderfang, but they're not. So, they come in with an Emolga, and we can go straight for the Icy Wind, look to debuff their attack stat, and I believe they are one away from back-to-back discharges, so there's no point shielding here, as they will still just barely outpace me to the next charge move. So, I'm now going to come back in with Salazzle, and this is just going to be another discharge. It's not going to be a full scent of the Acrobatics, so I can no shield that, as of course they are debuffed. Here I did consider going for a full farm down, however they would reach yet another discharge, so instead we go for the Poison Fang. We now swap into our Shadow Greninja, and of course I'm going to have to shield. Now, even though I of course am taking resisted damage from the Sucker Punches, they are still adding up here. Now, I wasn't quite sure if Night Slash would KO. I didn't want to risk it, so instead I full send the Hydro Cannon. This time around Night Slash should get the knockout, so I will throw straight away, but the opponent makes a really nice read there, expecting the Night Slash this time, so they swap and they catch it onto Salazzle, and unfortunately I'm in range where a single Incinerate will take me out before I can go for the full farm down. That is really nice play on the opponent's end there. They should not be beating this team there with the Salazzle in the back, and yet perfect catch enables them to get, wow. Let's try that again. Perfect catch enables them to get the win. So GG's to that trainer into the next battle. All right, I'm going to stop complimenting my opponents because it's making me really struggle to talk. So here we are going to see another Credilli safe swap, which again, not ideal for me. And this time around, it is a little bit more problematic for me just because they do have that Magnet Zone in the lead, where of course that's going to be very strong into my backline. We're going to go for the Poison Fang. I tried to snipe with a Waterfall there, but we don't get a zero-turn swap for some reason. So they do end up getting to the charge move. I guess it doesn't really matter because the Waterfall didn't quite KO anyways, but now they can snipe with a Shadow Magnet Zone. Not ideal for me at all. They're also now going to outpace me to the charge move, which isn't great. I expect it's probably a Mirror Shot bait there, but I can't really afford to not shield. But we have to go for the Poison Fang here. Poison Fang gonna be shielded. The opponent throws straight away, and this is actually huge for me. They go for another Mirror Shot. That's fine with me. They then swap out, but they're gonna have a Shadow Piloswine in the back. A Greninja easily gonna get the one shot here. Hydro Cannon gets the KO. Doesn't matter what they come in with now. We can just Water Shuriken, farm down the Magnet Zone. We can farm down the Credilli as well, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into next battle. I see a Shadow Victory Belt in the lead. So, once again, great lead matchup for the Salazzle. Honestly, picking up so many strong leads here. They're going to swap out into an Ice Fang Shadow Hippowdon. So, I'm going to shield once here, go for a full Waterfall farm down, and come out with a ton of energy. They're going to come back in with the Shadow Victory Belt, of course. I'm going to go straight for Icy Wind. Icy Wind, going to be shielded by the opponent. And here, I might as well just commit to another Icy Wind. The opponent is going to be forced to throw straight away as they fire off the Leaf Blade, but that's okay with me. We can come back in with Salazzle, and they are double weak to fire. I'm now going to swap out there because, of course, whilst yes, Salazzle has a good matchup, those sand attacks are going to add up over time as they are double super effective into Salazzle. Whereas now, we can go for Night Slash. What I'm aiming to do here is basically just put them into farm down range. What I don't want to do is allow the Shadow Victory Belt to come in, go for a huge farm down, and actually somehow reach back-to-back Leaf Blades. Because even though Salazzle does double resist Leaf Blade, I don't really trust it to tank charge moves that comfortably. Whereas now, we're at back-to-back Poison Fangs. There is nothing they can do. They end up shielding the first one. Doesn't really matter. We've got Poison Fang number 2 already locked and loaded. Poison Fang gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into next battle. I see Drapion in the lead. So this is going to be a fairly neutral matchup here, of course. They can spam Aqua Tails and they can get there before we even reach a potential Poison Fang. But I'm happy to shield here. I'm then going to go for one more Incinerate, dealing big damage, and then swapping into Samurott, where I do expect to wall their energy. The opponent's going to come in with a Dunsparce, but this is fine with me, as we've got Sacred Swords. We are going to pace exactly the same to the Sacred Swords as the opponent will to the Durons or the Rock Sides, and they actually go for a Rock Side there for some reason. I don't really understand that play. Either way, it doesn't really matter. As now, I'm going to go for a second Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword is going to be shielded, and the opponent does not overfarm. I'm hoping I've put them into range where I can just Water Shuriken and farm them down. It is going to be super close here, but unfortunately, Greninja just barely missing out there by a single damage or a single point of HP, but they end up shielding, and as a result, we KO through the shield, because if you didn't know, even when you shield, you do lose 1 HP there, so if you're on 1 HP, you will end up going down. But either way, it doesn't really matter, as we can go for Dragon Pulse. Dragon Pulse gets the KO there. They come back in with a Drapion, and the fact that they overfarm and allow a second Incinerate, I might as well just shield this, because now Poison Fang guaranteed to get the KO. It is, of course, resisted damage, but they are so low in HP. We get the knockout, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into next battle. I see Shadow Quagsire in the lead. Of course, that is not a great matchup for me whatsoever, so I'm going to be safe swapping into my Samurott. The opponent does farm up to a potential Stone Edge, so I'm definitely going to shield, and the opponent ends up full sending. They're now going to come in with a Togekiss, but I've got coverage in the form of Icy Wind. Icy Wind, going to hit for super effective damage. It also drops their attack stat, and not only that, I'm able to win CMP with a Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword probably wouldn't KO there, because it is, of course, non-stab and double resisted, but it does end up grabbing a shield. Now, unfortunately, I didn't quite put them into range where I could get off 2 Incinerates, so we don't get a huge farm down, but we do get the farm down. We're now going to come in with Greninja, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Licky Licky. Now, this isn't that bad of a matchup for me since I am ahead on energy. 2 Hydro Cannons will be enough damage to KO, and they look to overfarm here, which means I can now fire off the Night Slash. Night Slash, gotta be shielded. And at this point, I'm just going to no-shield. The opponent isn't quite a back-to-back body slams. They are, I believe, 1 away. So at this point, we're going to no-shield once again, and hopefully Salazzle can sweep this game. I believe they're in range where just 2 Incinerates should be taking out that Licky Licky. So all I need to do here, reach a Dragon Pulse with my Salazzle. Dragon Pulse easily going to be taking out the Quagsire, and they should be 3 away from a body slam. So here, all we need to do, go for the full farm down, but the opponent gets damage registration error. That is so unfortunate for me. I feel like I played that perfectly, given that was the worst lead Salazzle could see, and unfortunately, an inconsistent game mechanic ends up winning the opponent that game there. But GG's to that trainer into the next battle. We're going to see a Greninja in the lead, so not great for me. I'm going to be swapping out here, but I do stay in initially just to get, well, basically force the opponent to throw on alignment there, which is kind of ideal for me, as I can still outpace them since they do full send a Hydro Cannon. The Sacred Sword not going to be shielded for some reason. That is quite a strange decision there, especially since they're going to come in with a Ferret, another Pokemon that isn't going to do particularly well into my Samurott, as now we can go for Sacred Sword, and Sacred Sword is going to be shielded. The opponent going to fire for the Charge Move. They are going to look to go for a Trailblaze, boosting up their attack stat, but that's fine with me because that means I can now outpace them with my Greninja and full send a Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon going to be shielded by the opponent. That's fine with me. I'm now going to look to shield as well, as the opponent is going to fire off a boosted Swift, and Swift would do a ton of damage. They then swap into their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Hex normal cast form. I couldn't think of what this Pokemon was called there. I'm going to swap into Salazzle, and this seems like a strange decision since they are very close to back-to-back charge moves, and I'm actually going to shield there because now I believe I have put them into perfect Water Shuriken farm down range. If we don't quite get the farm down, that is going to backfire massively, but it is the perfect farm down. We leave with so much energy here. Of course, Hydro Cannon easily going to be enough damage to take out the Ferret, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there into next battle. I see another great lead for Salazzle, leading into Fortress. I will say a lot of the leads that I saw with Salazzle were very positive. It is quite a nice core breaker in the current meta, as a lot of opponents just not really expecting fire types, really. But anyways, we're going to swap out there after going for a Poison Fang. They don't even farm to the Hurricane, so that means I can just no-shield this, and I can barely outpace to a Sacred Sword. Now, this is resisted damage, but because I just debuffed them with the Poison Fang, it does enough damage to KO. Not only that, we've dealt a lot of damage up against the Fortress already, which does force a shield. I'm now going to come back in with Salazzle. I do expect them to swap out straight away, and they swap into Whiscash, which is a really strong Pokemon, into Salazzle. However, we've still got Greninja. We can shield the first charge move. They actually go for a Scald there, which probably implies they're on Scald and Blizzard, because Mud Bomb is definitely the right way to go. But now we can go for Hydro Cannon, and that means I can now outpace them to the next charge move quite comfortably. Hydro Cannon, number 2, doesn't quite get the knockout there, but either way, it doesn't really matter. We've still got a shield here. All we need to do is get the KO with a single Incinerate. I do allow the full farm down. Incinerate gets the KO there, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle. I see Lantern in the lead, and once again, it's going to be a Water Gun Lantern. This time around, I do know that already, so I do swap out straight away there. As of course, last time, I wasn't quite sure if it would be Spark or Water Gun, and if it was Spark, I did not want to swap into my Samurott. Either way, I'm going to grab a shield advantage into this Wigglytuff. However, we are in a really tricky situation. They do actually get quite a lot of energy there as they fully farm me down, which means they should be reaching back-to-back Swifts, and I don't really want to shield my Salazzle, knowing that it is completely useless up against the Water Gun Lantern, so I'm going to no-shield this. However, if they do end up shielding a Poison Fang, I could be in trouble. Either way, we go for Poison Fang, and the opponent is going to no-shield, but they come in with their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Licky Licky, which means, unfortunately, they're now ahead on energy, which means they can outpace every single time to the Body Slams. Of course, I could go for a bait with a Night Sash, but I need a Hydro Cannon and a Night Sash to KO anyways, so yeah, we go for the Hydro Cannon first. I guess potentially if I went for Night Sash first and got a boost, maybe that could flip this matchup here where I only have to go for Night Sashes, but either way, I'm now going to go for the Night Sash. Night Slash will be enough damage to KO. No boost there, unfortunately, for me, but I can go for another Night Slash. Now, I'm probably going to need a boost, and I will definitely need to make a catch in this matchup. I'm going to look to overfarm. That is too early for the Thunderbolt, but then I looked at my HP. I realized even Surf-resisted damage gets the KO there, so it's going to be very tricky to catch a charge move, and so at that point, unfortunately, they can Water Gun farm me down, and I lose that game. But GG's up on there, into the next battle. I can see Togekiss in the lead, so a decent matchup for me, especially since they throw straight away, of course, looking to grab an early shield advantage, but that's fine with me because now we can farm up to back-to-back Poison Fangs and potentially grab both shields back from the opponent. Poison Fang gonna be shielded. I wait there just to see if they make a catch. They don't try and make a catch or anything, so Poison Fang, number 2, grabs the shield. I then try to swap and catch a Side Shock onto my Samurott. It does not work out as the opponent holds onto the energy, but they come in with more Morpeko, and this is fine with me. We've got access to Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword is super effective. It takes out the Morpeko, and their final Pokemon is going to be Credilli. Once again, we've also got Icy Wind for super effective damage. I believe Icy Wind is going to do slightly more damage than a Sacred Sword here. Either way, it doesn't really matter too much as we debuff their attack stat, which is what we wanted. We can come in with Greninja. They're going to be forced to swap and try and make a catch, which doesn't work out for them, as I was always going to overfarm there, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle, and the final battle, I believe, of this video, once again, leading into Piloswine, so really positive matchup for me. The opponent going to be swapping out into a Fearow, but we go for Poison Fang, and the opponent, trying to throw on good timing, actually just gets fully KO'd by the Incinerate damage there. That puts them at a huge disadvantage. They now come in with Corviknight, and I feel like this game is already over. Of course, they are double weak to fire already. We've got 3 Pokemon that are neutral, at least, neutral at least, into the Corviknight, plus very strong into the Piloswine. We go for Hydro Cannon. They have to no-shield there, but that's just game over. We're going to no-shield as well as the opponent going to get the KO with the Air Cutter. I'm going to come in with the Samurott, and the opponent is going to swap out straight away into Piloswine. They don't throw on the best timing, so I'm going to look to shield here as they go for an Icicle Spear bait. Doesn't really make a difference. I swap into Salazzle. We get the Incinerate farm down. We Incinerate, farm down the Corviknight as well, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.